Before we dive into this clip, quick disclaimer. We had a little bit of issues with Slime's video, so we decided we were just going to put an audio waveform for clarity instead. If you enjoyed this clip, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel below. Thank you so much for watching, and now to the clip with Aiden and Slime. A little different, and I tend to think, based off my reporting, that Nintendo does not, and they might be right, Nintendo does not think that Super Smash Bros. Esports moves enough units. Like, people aren't buying the game because of that. They probably already have it, and so to them, it's very much a bottom line decision. That's kind of where we're at. So, what's been happening over the past week is that Smash World Tour says, well, we were basically told we had to shut down. Nintendo says, well, we didn't tell them to shut down. And now we're in this weird place where it's just been like mudslinging back and forth, is how I described it in a newsletter last week, where it's basically, we didn't tell you to shut down, but we implied that you should have or face legal jeopardy. And that the Smash World Tour people took that as, well, fuck, we have no choice. Like, we got to shut down, basically, right? And that's where we're at. And the recent update today is that Alan Bunny, who's accused of being anti-competitive and generally quite shitty to his peers, stepped down today as Panda Global CEO. And we said that he would have some sort of evidence to prove that the Smash World Tour is lying.
Yeah. Also, really quick, another interjection for the Normans out there. Why do you care? Why do you guys care so much? Like, it's just like a Smash game. This game, Melee in particular, it's like crack for your fingers. It is so beautiful. It is something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. Me and Aiden will be playing this game, screaming at each other until we're 60 years old, because it's that deep and that accidentally amazing. And the reason why that grassroots scene has been so strong and surrounding it, and Ultimate, and the newer games, right, as they come out, which the scenes are usually kind of schismed, but it's just the fact that they're that good. You know what I mean? As a competitive game. And I think that should be sort of stated, just to make sure.
They have an emotional tie to them too, and I do want to get y'all's broader thoughts on this topic now that we kind of go through the intro for people unfamiliar. But these games have a very significant emotional resonance to them in a way that many other video games do not. Super Smash Bros. Melee is a 21-year-old game, or will be in a few weeks, and that is quite significant. That there is a seemingly hundreds of thousands at minimum number of people that still care about it in 2022. That doesn't happen. The emotional connection that people have to this is very unique. It's part of the reason you see the reactions in the way that you have. People are angry. I would say that anger has been misguided. People have been doxxed since this entire scandal happened, which is not okay. But the anger, the vitriol is totally understandable. So with that, Slime, Aiden, what are your broader thoughts on kind of where things stand now after like a week of mudslinging, more or less?
Aiden has thoughts and feelings. I personally I'm more of like a pundit at this point, because I don't have my wrists kind of deep in the workings of tournaments and stuff. But I know all the stuff that Aiden knows, because we talk all the time and we hang out. We've worked together, and I worked at Beyond the Summit. I produced Smash events. Aiden's been doing that before he worked at Beyond the Summit. And so there's this level of oh shit, what's going on now? What's the war look like? Because let me tell you, this all happening right now with Alan, this is like in Game of Thrones when the Night King is I'm threatening everything. Cause the war between BTS and VGBC and whoever else wanted to step up and broadcast tournaments, because that's how revenue is generated, was a thing, right? It was competition. But this person came in and said, no, I'm taking everything away as far as what I've heard. And that's where this finally got sort of exposed, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about kind of the levels of onus here, and who is actually at fault for what part of it. I think there has been a lot of discomfort or problems with the way Panda tried to convince people to join their circuit over the course of from the original announcement to all the planning and all the changes and inconsistencies in messaging that they provided different TOs in order to make their circuit happen. I've kind of talked about how like I imagine Alan was in this really challenging place where after years of like slow discussion with Nintendo, he finally got the green light to like move forward with this circuit. This is
Yeah.
how I imagine it playing out, by the way. Is like Alan at the end
And
of
and I
2020.
just want to
Yeah.
say you're right, by the way, and I won't share what happened in this conversation, but I can say myself, and I don't think anybody said this, that like it took Panda years, like at
Yeah.
least 3+ to get Nintendo on board with this idea. I remember being at Genesis 2020 before the world fell apart during the pandemic and going to an off the record drink with a representative from Nintendo and Alan. After the event, things shut down. I was done with my media work and I was just like, I like went to go get a drink with him. And again, I'm not going to share the contents of the conversation because it was off the record, but like there was a Nintendo person at that drink, or at that social gathering, and I was sort of perplexed that someone was even there, that they even cared enough to be there. And so it did take them years. Anyway, continue. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just a really slow moving company, right? And the way I see it is at the end of 2021, somebody at Nintendo was finally like, "Hey, this is a go. Announce this and get this going next year. We can do it." And Alan, with not a lot of time to put together this monstrosity of a task, has to now execute a circuit from the perspective of somebody who is not really a TO himself. And I would say, like, as someone who is like deeply ingrained in circles of organizers that like do communicate with one another and do execute events, Alan hasn't really been a part of that circle of people. So he's like calling upon a bunch of people relatively last minute to like activate this massive thing that, like, from Smash World Tour's perspective, they took at least a year in advance of the first one to like start planning a project like this. And Alan basically had a few months from like the announcement. So I do sympathize with the fact that he had what to me was like an almost impossible task, and probably from his perspective had to do whatever he could to try and like get it off the ground and have a successful year one, because Nintendo is so difficult and slow to work with that the opportunity, if you were to blow it, probably isn't going to come around again because of like how difficult managing a relationship with them could be. So that's kind of like the beginning of it to me. And then over the course of trying to convince people to get on tournaments, there is a lot of like stretching the truth, perhaps intentionally lying. We don't really know until like Alan or like maybe people from Panda answered questions. But to get people to join the circuit, like a really consistent thing that was told prior to the new Smash World Tour that got announced this year was that if Smash World Tour announces, they're going to be shut down immediately. They will not run next year, so come be a part of our circuit. And I can absolutely tell you that was true, because that was messaging that was told to me and probably like dozens of other people. That was like, we were all convinced that Smash World Tour wasn't even going to happen this year because of stuff Alan was saying. And then all of a sudden Smash World Tour announces and moves forward. And it's something that you can be a part of. So there's this big question of like, well, why would like Alan like tell us the opposite? Like, what is that? Is that a lie? Is it a misunderstanding? Because that message was like so like hammered on for so long. It's weird that that's not the case. So now that leaves me like with an uneasy feeling, and other TOs with an uneasy feeling of like, well, what else that's been communicated to me like might not necessarily be true or consistent, and it doesn't like set a great like groundwork for wanting to work with them in like the coming year, right? And then on top of that, I think as some TOs, including Smash World Tour, as they noted in their statements, started going directly to Nintendo to seek licenses and have conversations with them. And upon having conversations with Nintendo, realized that there were more discrepancies between what Alan was telling them and what Nintendo was telling them. So it's an even worse look, because it now really does seem like Alan is not telling us the truth. Alan is like manipulating things or saying things in order to convince people to join the circuit. So now maybe from Alan's perspective, this is all in the right? This is justified because he sees a community-focused licensed circuit as the path forward for the community to be successful and to grow. I imagine Alan is not like a villain. He probably wants what's best for this scene he's been a part of for 15 years, and maybe it's also what like grows his company and like makes it successful in the long run. Like those two things can like be true. But as like the year progressed, I think we got to this point where like a lot of TOs didn't trust Alan. And that's why, if you look at the events that are a part of the Panda circuit, why so few events that have history in this community actually signed on to it. Like, I think the number one complaint about the Panda circuit was like, well, look at what it's composed of. It's like actually pretty barren in terms of like historical Smash events.
Yeah.
And it was filled with like last minute signifiers and like regionals that like don't have a lot of history. And that's something to note. Now, the match that's sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, also during this process and before it, right? Imagine you're a TO of a big tournament that has been established for years, right? There's two things that Panda is coming at you with. One is that you are basically, when you're a TO, you're the belle of the ball, and all the broadcast companies will come to you and they're like, can you be on our channel? And like, and because that's how you get revenue, right? And to the level of which a company will break off a piece of their revenue to stream the tournament on their channel and let you like an interweave has been a thing for the past like 4 years. It's actually developed into, I believe, a pretty healthy relationship. And so when
by the way, a market that didn't exist before then and was created by Beyond the Summit, because they came in and Beyond the Summit came in and were like, oh, you guys, like these streams, like these other streams don't pay you for the right to broadcast your event. In fact, it often happens the other way around.
You had to
reason.
Pay them to produce your tournament and they would keep all the revenue, right? This was a bad model that took advantage of tournament organizers, and I believe, I will argue, was corrected because of Beyond the Summit's involvement eventually into the tournament scene. And so you're a TO. You look very pretty. You're going to have a lot of top players at your tournament, and someone comes to you, but this is a new person, and they say it's going to be on this channel, and you're okay. Well, these companies can break us off this amount of revenue if we hit these numbers. What can you give? I don't know. What is Alan saying? Who knows? But he's also saying this will be part of a big circuit.
Give you an official Nintendo license, right? That, I guess that's like sort of the veil is like, well, we can make sure your shit doesn't get rocked. But to Aiden's point earlier, like, you know, when the shit has not been rocked for so long,
things have been okay, like, right? But also, he says, or this person says, let's just call it Bamboo Global. They say it's going to be on a circuit. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that sound fun? And if you're a TO, you're like, no, it doesn't, because circuits have been tried before, and circuits didn't work out because they're mismanaged and they're weird. And and Aiden's laughing right now because of how close, but how far it would get sometimes. Circuits are not a good word to hear these days.
Also, where are the PF thoughts?
Bro, just let me find them. Let me watch Junebug cook.
Anyway.
Sorry. I wanted to clarify that as the perspective of a TO, because this is where the wars are being fought, right? In these calls with these organizers.
It is very much, it's a scene that is, I think Aiden summed it up pretty well earlier. It's a scene that has been left to its own devices for so long that it figured out its own devices, to your point, Slime. It figured out what made it kind of work. Again, break even is working. What sort of makes it work, and then now it's being disrupted by two different parties, Nintendo, who's being more hands-on, and Panda, who is coming in with sort of this official license and idea to sort of shake things up a little bit. And while I don't think initially I don't think that was ill-intentioned, I do think based off everything we've heard, it became that way.
What Panda and Nintendo like don't seem to understand, and I kind of glean this from like conversations over time of just like the general vibe, if you will, of Alan's sentiment about like the community growing it, what tournament organizers like were doing wrong, what is like wrong with the Smash landscape as a whole, and also just Nintendo's decision making is like this circuit and this shutdown coming in at a weird time where to me, I want to say isn't even like coincidental. Where the Smash scene without those parties has become surprisingly developed as far as their business goes. Like the ecosystem of Smash financially is stronger than it's ever been. And we're in a place where we weren't for a long time, where we have the capability to fund events and do interesting things for players. And like, there's just a lot more wealth to be spread around because like the actual business development of the scene has grown a lot in the last few years. And I think we have demonstrably shown that we have done a better job for ourselves than Nintendo and Panda are now coming in to like offer. And that was a big reason like why a lot of these TOs said no, because it was like really providing very little benefit to them. And also it's a little I'm trying to think of the word. Like I want to say aloof, but that's not that's not exactly what I mean. But it feels like they aren't taking into account like what we've managed to do, and off the tail of all the times in the past that Nintendo has like impeded the growth of the Smash community. So I think there were like some leaks that came out last year where a lot of the conversations behind the scenes that like a lot of people did know about, but the public never really knew, finally came to light. And that's the context that I think is like removed from a lot of this when we talk about it. Like if you're a new person coming fresh into this conversation, it might not seem as bad as it does to somebody who's close to it all, because we have the understanding in the context of how many times in the past Nintendo has tripped us up. So for you to come in late and be like, here's the keys to this beautiful licensed circuit, and you're gonna do great now if you just sign on, after we've done all this work for ourselves and after it's in spite of what you've done to us in the past, it's like, well, why would that make me want to work with you? You don't have to do the bare minimum like a company for a newer game might have to do. You have to go above and beyond to prove to me that this support is legitimate, for me to take you seriously and for me to trust you. And I don't think this circuit this year and the decisions Nintendo has made, not even the decisions Panda has made, prove to me in any capacity that I would want them involved in anything. And that's why I'm never going to go to a Nintendo licensed event again, because this is like the last straw. This isn't like, oh, this is happening in a vacuum, right? This is on the tail end of years of them fucking with the bag. And now they've done maybe the worst decision of them all. I've also stressed this really hard, is like, you know what would have been better than some corporate exec above the competitive team at Nintendo saying, let's shut this shit down? Just outcompete the circuit. Leverage your $50 billion company to just run a better circuit, and you would have won in a year anyway. Instead, you shot yourself in the foot. And that's because the guy making the decision, I am so confident, is so removed and disconnected from what any of this means to any of us. He probably doesn't give a shit. And he's just like, yeah, well, It doesn't have a license. Let's shut this down. And that's
an
the
easy
problem.
legal
that's
question.
the problem.
You know?
That is the guy at Nintendo who gets to make the decisions, and why I will never want to work with them.
In addition, I want to say like, so what? Just let's take a step out and zoom out, because people tend to not understand, which makes sense. The purpose of broadcast media is to sell advertising spots to monetize people watching your screen, right? That's you might be like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, no, for real. So that means selling ads, selling sponsorships. And if you have a circuit, which means you can package all of these tournaments together and you can get everyone to work together, and you can go to big company. I like to use Doritos a lot. You go to Doritos and you say, we can have Doritos at all like 9 events with like 50,000 people watching the whole year. And they say, okay, here's $1 million, right? That's what you make a circuit for, is to get the attention of blue chip advertisers and then get a lot of money and hopefully break that off to everybody and spread that around, right? Now, the funny part is, if you have a circuit, right, you can easily leverage that. But we did that as a community, and I will say, I think the sales team Beyond the Summit worked their ass off. They did that, right? The Papa John's deal was done without a sort of like that sort of collective weird control. It was just people working together, you know?
And Nintendo didn't like it. Nintendo didn't like it, dude. That's the problem. We have done something so substantial and tangible to help ourselves. And they're like, It's like, you didn't wait for our 8-week response time to negotiate this deal with the ad agency, who already is impatient with you. It's because ad agencies are just like a nightmare to work with, right?
It is honestly, to your point, Aiden, it's like, it's this disrespect of the history, the scrappiness, you know, which is like truly meaningful, emotionally meaningful to every single person who's ever ran a tournament, a bootstrap tournament, is like, you know, these aren't overnight things. They're hard. They're emotional. They come with ups and downs where it feels like you're going to fail. And then they come with the highs of seeing it all put together, right? And it's like, that truly means something to people. And to come in and say that we can do it and be better, it is disrespectful, truly. I mean, I do think, like...
Especially when it is functionally worse. I think that's the irony. Is it's
right.
Come over to our circuit for a worse deal.
And it's the ball pit from the Tumblr meetup.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the thing is the other part too is that I look at this situation trying to sort of speculate here about Nintendo and how some of these big companies work and with their IP. I think they saw someone as Panda as an opportunity that someone will do it for us, right? They'll figure it out. And while like Panda, before all of this, before the circuit launched in April or was announced in April, Panda did have cred in the fighting game community to an extent.
Yeah.
Right? Like among players, etc. Like people consider them pretty highly regarded. They're one of the few fighting game specific organizations that have figured out how to make things like monetarily sound for the most part. They had some cred, but they didn't have that sort of tournament organizer cred, which is a whole different ball game.
It is
with a whole lot of other moving parts. It's a very difficult sum of parts to be able to put that all together. And so starting from everything, starting from square one, I think Nintendo was like, great, somebody else is going to do this for us. Wonderful. We don't have to, because if Nintendo, let's say, hypothetically, Nintendo was to start their own Smash circuit that they ran, it was first party organized, etc. They're going to have to lose probably hundreds of millions of dollars on it before it finally gets to any sort of level. And it may never get to any sort of level to become, making up its money. Right? Like if they were going to go put together the finale event or whatever else, right? Like, and they were going to do all of this work. It was going to cost them hiring. It was going to cost them a bunch of, sort of venue fees, organizing, all the different things that come with that. You guys run events. You know how this works. Like it's an expensive sort of amalgamation. And so to Nintendo, it's, hey, somebody else is going to do this for us. They'll eat the brunt of the cost. They'll figure out how it works economically. We don't have to deal with it. But then on the other side, like they chose the wrong person. They chose someone that didn't have,
and it's all about the people, right? It's not like you could just drop someone in and like, okay, run a tournament. Like it is such a specialized skill set that is built over years.
Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.